Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Jamie Womack-Williams. I'm the State Education Issues Director for Texas A&T's Bridges Institute for Professional Development. This afternoon, we are going to be talking about the T-TESS evaluation system that is used across the state to evaluate teachers. I have an assistant this afternoon. Her name is Hannah Garcia. So if you run into any issues throughout this webinar, and I'm talking because I've got like multiple screens going, you can send Hannah a message. She will be monitoring the chat box and communicating with me throughout this webinar to make sure that all of your questions are answered. At the end of this session, we will have time for questions and answers. So I just ask that if you just hold on to your question until the end, because there's probably a great probability that I may answer it during the session. So just hang on to those at the end and we will have time to answer those. I will issue you CPE credit. We are TA accredited, so you will receive a certificate in the next few days with the number of hours that you participated in this webinar. So be looking for that email to come from either myself or Hannah Garcia in the coming days. Okay, we will get started. A little bit about us. We are Texas A&T. We chartered in 1974 as the Texas Federation of Teachers. And then in 2007, we renamed ourselves to Texas A&T. We are affiliated with 1.7 million members of the American Federation of Teachers and 12.5 million members of the AFL-CIO. Our membership base consists of teachers, support personnel, anyone that doesn't have the authority to hire or fire school employees. And this is who we represent, all non-administrative certified or classified public school employees in the traditional public school and some charters, to represent the interest of teachers, counselors, librarians, diagnosticians, custodians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, nurses, teaching assistants, and clerical employees. We also have some local affiliates at the university level in community and junior colleges. You received an email from me probably about 30 minutes ago that gave you a link to a Google Classroom. Because the file is so large, it will not, Zoom does not allow us to drop it in the chat box, all of the documents, but you can go to the link that I sent you, and Hannah will also post the link in the chat box for you to access the Google Classroom. And in that Google Classroom, you will find tonight's PowerPoint. You will find all of the documents that we're going to be discussing, along with the virtual rubric that TEA released at the end of August. So we're going to try to make this as fun and interactive as possible. So we are going to be using our Zoom tools. So you will need to access your annotation feature during this session. If you are on an iPad or an iPhone, you will not be able to access these features, but if you are on a laptop, desktop, MacBook, you should be able to access the features. So if you click down on the annotate, you may see it at the bottom, or you may have to go up to the top and click on those three dots, and one of those will be the feature for you to access your annotation tools. If you have any trouble, message Hannah, because we just went through this about an hour ago on how to make sure everyone could access those features.
Hi, Jamie. This is Claudia from HFT. I just want to tell you that the annotation tool is available on the iPad. I'm able to access the tool. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, they must have did and upgraded. That's good. I'm glad Apple jumped on board with the iPad for that. Okay, awesome. So we want to know where you are from. Based on the registration, we have people from all corners of Texas. So if you will access your annotation, click on the stamp and pick whatever stamp you want, heart, star, whatever it is, and mark your spots on the map. if you perhaps are on an iPhone or any kind of phone that doesn't have the annotation tools, or if you can't access them, you can put it in the chat box. Okay, looks like we have a lot of people from the Houston area, some from the San Antonio, someone up from between Dallas, up around the Dallas area. So great. Thank you for joining us tonight. The goals of this presentation are going to be that I want you to understand the T-TESS process. I am actually a certified T-TESS administrator, so I went through the 3-day academy through the Educational Service Center, where I learned things from the perspective of the administrator so that I could come back and help you through the process of knowing exactly what your administrator has been taught to look for when they are doing your evaluation. I want you to understand how the domains, the dimensions, the descriptors, and the performance level of this rubric apply to your roles and responsibilities in the classroom. And I also am going to discuss at the end ways that you can properly document and maintain evidence throughout the year so that when you get to your end of year conference, you go in there confidently knowing that you have done everything you possibly can to help your students and yourself be successful. In the chat box, if you recognize this gentleman, please tell me who he is. And if you know who he is, what his title is.
Commissioner of Education.
Yes, Jose, you are correct. He is Mike Marath, the Commissioner of Education. A little bit about the Commissioner of Education. Hang on just a minute. We've got some stars up here I need to clear. Okay. A little bit about the Commissioner of Education, and his background is he was on the Dallas ISD School Board from 2011 until his appointment as the Commissioner of Education in late 2015. He was behind some things that happened in Dallas ISD, basically trying to turn Dallas ISD into this a charter school. Fortunately, that failed. But then he was appointed as the commissioner. He attended Texas Public Schools and graduated from Garland High School. He did teach computer science at that high school just for a short period of time when a teacher unexpectedly resigned, but he does not have a solid teaching background. He is also the chairman of Marath Investments that supports the education reform movement, which has to do with increasing the number of charters across the state, educational savings account, vouchers, things that pull money away from the public school system and put them in other places. His position is appointed by the governor. So if the governor changes, the commissioner will change. That's why it's important to get out and vote. A little bit about the T-TESS system and how we got here, because of those of us who have been in education for quite some time are fully aware that we did PDOS for like close to 20 years. So at the federal level, under the Bush administration, No Child Left Behind was passed, and that went in effect from 2002 to 2015. Part of No Child Left Behind said that a teacher's evaluation had to be linked to standardized testing, commonly called VAM, the value added measure. Texas being Texas, we drug our feet on that, and along the way, all of the evaluation systems we came up with did not meet the criteria of No Child Left Behind. But when we finally figured it out in late 2015, the federal government did away with No Child Left Behind and replaced it with Every Student Succeeds Act. Under that act, it eliminated that VAM component to teachers' evaluations. So the evaluation systems for all teachers across the United States no longer have to be linked to standardized testing results. At the state level, I just explained that how it required that, you know, it be an evaluation system that met the requirements of NCLB. VAM is not to be used as part of your teacher evaluation system. There was a lawsuit that was filed after ESSA became the law here in Texas. We were behind that said you cannot tie a teacher's evaluation to standardized testing results. It's not a good indication of a teacher's ability to teach. Districts have two choices. They can either use the teacher appraisal system that's developed by TEA, which is the T-TESS system, or they can develop their own locally developed teacher appraisal system. Some districts that use their own in-house developed appraisal system are like PSJA, that's in the Rio Grande Valley. Aldine ISD currently has their own teacher evaluation system, but they are planning to move to T-TESS next year. They are piloting it at a few campuses. Also, Houston ISD has their own teacher appraisal system. Sci-Fair, which is right outside of Houston, uses T-TESS, but they've made a couple of modifications to it, but nothing major is modified in their evaluation system. In fact, the things that they did change, I think are great. These are things to know about T-TESS. Number one, it does not require improvement plans. If you were evaluated under PDOS, there was a thing called a TINA, Teacher in Need of Assistance. If you received, I think it was 2 below expectations or 1 unsatisfactory rating, it was an automatic TINA. Under T-TESS, because it is considered a growth plan, there are no improvement plans. It should be continuously and consistently building off of all of a teacher's prior efforts. It uses data as part of the process to promote and track professional growth. It uses performance levels rather than performance ratings. Under PDOS, it was a rating system. So if you received an exceeds proficient, that meant that in that particular category, you were at 90 to 100%. With T-TESS, it's using levels. You cannot tie numbers to a level system. It uses multiple things to get your level. It uses conferences, observations, both formal and informal, your goal setting and professional development plan, information from pre-conferences and post-conferences. Here are the 3 components of the T-TESS evaluation system. 70% of your score is going to be based on observations. 10% is going to be based on the goal setting and professional development plan, and 20% is going to be based on student growth. Okay, let's talk about student growth. Remember earlier I said VAM is not an option. That means that student growth cannot be derived from your STAR test results. Student growth should be pre and post test. You give a test at the beginning of the year, you give that test at the end of the year and see if the students showed growth. Student portfolios are an option. And student learning objectives, which is you pick an area like reading and you administer a test and you say, okay, here's where my kids scored at the beginning of the year and I would like them to grow you know, 20% this school year, and then you re-administer that, you know, whatever that test is that you gave them to see if they actually grew by 20% by the end of the school year. Now we're going to dive into the domains and the dimensions. The T-TESS rubric has 4 domains and 16 dimensions. The 4 domains are planning, instruction, learning environment, professional practices, and responsibilities. Under the planning domain, you have the 4 dimensions: standards and alignment, data and assessment, knowledge of students, and activities. Then there are 5 under instruction, 3 under learning environment, and 4 under professional practices and responsibilities. And we're going to dive deeper into the rubric on the next slide. So we're going to discuss these 6 areas: domain, dimension, performance levels, standards basis, evidence, and descriptors. The domain. This particular rubric may look different from the one that you have been issued from your district. This rubric was the one that I actually received during the administrator 3-day training that I thought was more valuable to teachers versus the one that you were probably issued. But you will find at the top of this rubric, you will find the domain. Then you will find the dimension. So this particular one is dimension 1.1, standards and alignment. Then you have 5 performance levels: distinguished, accomplished, proficient, developing, and improvement needed. And under each of those performance levels, there are the descriptors that tell you what you have to do to score under that level. The standards basis, and I get a lot of questions about this. What do these letters and these numbers mean? We will get to that next, about what does that 1A, 1B, 3A, 3B, and 3C actually mean. Evidence. These are the sources of evidence that your administrator is going to use to actually decide what level you are going to fall under. They're going to use information from your pre-conference, your formal observation, and anything going on in your classroom. And then the descriptors are listed under each column of the performance levels. And as I said earlier, that is all the things that you have to do to score under that level. Last but not least, at the bottom of this, you see student-centered actions all the way to the left and teacher-centered actions all the way to the right. So the way I like to explain what this means is, if you've ever seen, or maybe you actually have, what they call a flipped classroom. A flipped classroom is basically where teachers or students do all of the application in the classroom and they get their direct instruction at home. So they will actually like read anything, watch any videos. Maybe the teacher videos herself and does hang on just a minute. Sorry about that. I had a puppy Zoom bombing. Anyways, at the bottom, the student-centered are all the way to the left. The teacher-centered are all the way to the right. The student-centered would be what we call a flipped classroom, where everything, the students are basically doing what you would normally see happening in a classroom. They're doing it at home. They're watching a teacher video. They're reading text, maybe doing all of those things at home, and then when they come to class the next day, they're actually doing the application part of it. The teacher-centered actions all the way to the far right are basically the teacher doing everything for the students. This would be a type of environment where maybe the kids don't know the routines about how to turn in a paper or the rules of the classroom. It would look very chaotic in that classroom. You know, the teacher's having to say, hey, Johnny, go turn your paper in now, rather than kids just understanding you go turn your paper in this spot after you're you're finished. So that is kind of what that bar means. Most teachers are going to be right down the middle, proficient, because this is how a normal classroom runs. This is where a teacher's doing some direct instruction. The kids are doing some maybe peer, working with peers, maybe working in small groups, the teachers, rotating kids through centers or whatever. That is where majority of your teachers will land. And so we will talk more about that in a minute. So I was discussing that standards basis earlier. Under that planning dimension 1.1, there was 1A, 1B, 3A, 3B, and 3C listed. So this is where that information comes from. It comes from Chapter 149 of the Commissioner's Rules concerning educator standards. So 1A, teacher designs clear, well-organized, sequential lessons that build on students' prior knowledge. And then under 1A, there's some additional information that the teacher has to do that directly relates to dimension 1.1. Then 1B, teachers design developmentally appropriate, standards-driven lessons that reflect evidence-based best practices. And then there's a couple of other items that relate to that 1B. So if you went through the entire rubric, you would find Chapter 149 of the Commissioner's Rules on Educator Standards. It would be referenced somewhere within that rubric. So if you read through all of those things, they will appear somewhere. And those are things that you're required to do as a classroom teacher. Also in the rubric that I provided you, it has this really great cheat sheet. Because this came from the administrator manual, this is what they were taught to look for when they come into your classroom to observe. They are going to be looking for, do you have your TEK and your lesson objective posted somewhere in the classroom? I remember when we started using T-TESS, teachers were like, oh my gosh, they're like always on me about posting my TEK and my lesson objective. Well, this is why. This is what they were taught to look for when they come into your classroom. During that lesson, you need to refer to that objective throughout that lesson. Students, today we're going to learn, whatever the concept is for the day. Are you sequencing your materials? The assessments that you are doing, do they lead to student mastery of that objective? Does your lesson fit to what you have on your board as your course objective? Like all of that has to align. In the rubric that I provided you in that packet of papers, you will find this for every dimension, all 16 of them. Will have the look-fors. I recommend that before you have a formal observation that you go through this rubric and actually look at all of these look-fors and make sure that you're hitting those during your formal observations. Now we're going to go into the scoring criteria. So I'm going to launch some poll questions. And what I want you to answer is if you think it's a requirement under the law or just a recommendation that the developers of T-TESS recommended. So the first one is going to be about the 45-minute observation. So go ahead and select your answer if you think it's required or recommended. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So 73% of you said it was required and 27% said recommended. On our next slide, we will find out the answer to these. Multiple observations, both formal and informal. So let me launch the next question. Multiple observations, are they required or recommended? Okay, I'm going to end this question and share the results. 37% of you said required, 63% recommended. Okay. Our next question is going to be about pre-conference for all formal observations. Pre-conference for all formal observations. Is it required or recommended? Okay, I'm going to end the poll, share the results, and 71% of you said it's required, 29% said recommended. Our next question is going to be, is it required or recommended to receive a notice for a formal evaluation? Do you have to receive a notice for a formal evaluation? Okay, I'm going to share the results for this question. 57% of you said it's required and 43% said recommended. Okay. Our next question is going to be about post-conferences. Is it required or recommended to have a post-conference within 10 business days? Is it required or recommended? %97% of you said it is required, while only 3% said that it's recommended. Okay, our next one is going to be about improvement plans. Does T-TESS mandate improvement plans? Does T-TESS mandate improvement plans? I will know if you were listening at the beginning as I discussed this. Unless you came in late and you didn't hear that. So you have a good excuse. Okay, and here's the results for that one. 32% said yes, 68% said no. Okay, let me move some things around here on my screen. So we are going to go to the next slide that's going to give us the answers. So there are two things. There are requirements that are dictated by the Commissioner of Education that says these are the requirements that administrators have to do when evaluating a teacher. The recommendations are the things that your administrator learned in the 3-day T-TESS Academy. The developers behind the T-TESS evaluation said, in order for teachers to improve their practice, this is what they need from administrators. So under the law, the commissioner says you have to have one observation. It has to be 45 minutes, a minimum of 45-minute observation. There's no requirements as to whether your administrator has to tell you they are coming or not. They can just show up anytime to do a formal 45-minute observation. The post-conference has to happen within 10 business days. The pre-conference is optional. This is what the law says. Now, when you dig into the administrator manual of T-TESS, it says, in order for a teacher to show growth and continue to improve their practice, the things that they need are, they need multiple observations, both formal and informal, so that they're constantly receiving that feedback that they need to say, okay, maybe I need to focus more on this area, so the next time your administrator comes in, they see improvements in that area that maybe you are lacking in. During your formal observation, in order for them to score domains 1, 2, and 3, they need to be there during the entire lesson length, the beginning, the middle, and the end, because throughout that rubric, when you go and you look at it and you read all of those descriptors, they have to be present in order to observe those items. You should have at least one announced and one unannounced observation, in addition to walkthroughs. However, I work with teachers from all over the state, and what I find is that you usually have one announced observation with a pre-conference, because it is a tremendous amount of work on the administrator side, where they're supposed to be really focusing on what students are saying and doing rather than what the teacher is saying and doing, and trying to dictate all that. It's a lot of paperwork on their side. So most administrators feel a sense of relief if they can at least get one formal observation in a year. T-TESS recommends that you have your post-conference within 48 hours in person while it's still fresh on your mind. The pre-conference should take place for all announced observations. This is the recommendations in the T-TESS manual. However, it is not a requirement by law. And Hannah has alerted me that some of you are having issues accessing the Google Classroom. Make sure that you're not using your school Google accounts, because they only allow certain people with district email addresses to access the Google Classroom. So you may have to go into your personal Gmail accounts and log in that way to access the classroom. If that still does not work, you can shoot me an email and I will figure out how to get the documents to you, but just make sure you're not on your school account. Oops. This is the rubric word bank. This is the descriptive words that you will find throughout all of the descriptors. So in some instances, you'll see that it says all students are doing this. This is happening consistently in your classroom. This always is happening. This is why this can't be a rating system where numbers can be tied to the different levels, because there is no numerical value that you can tie to any of these words other than all and always. We know that that means 100% of the time, but consistently, few, some, most, there's no numerical value that you can tie to that or to those words. Let's talk a little bit about scoring. When your evaluator comes in to do a formal observations, The 3 domains that they will be scoring is all of domains 2 and 3 and some of domain 1. Now, if you recall, when we were talking about that domain rubric earlier, part of the items that they use to score you is like pre-conferences, because they're going to talk about like, what does your data look like? How are you determining what you need to teach and how you need to teach it? They're going to be looking at all of those aspects, but some of domain 1 will be scored during that formal observation. Domain 1 is scored based on conversations, walkthroughs, artifacts, student growth. When your evaluator comes into your classroom, they should be focusing on what students are saying and doing, and not just what the teacher is saying or doing. That was very difficult for me when I went through the 3-day academy, because you really want to, because we've been conditioned under PTESS that you were paying attention more to what the teacher was saying and doing rather than what the students were doing. And so under T-TESS, your evaluator should be focusing more on what those students are saying and doing rather than what you are saying and doing. And domain 4 is scored at the end of the year during your end of year conference. But we will talk about domain 4 a little more later. Pre-conference, let's talk about pre-conference. Remember, under the T-TESS recommendations, it is recommended that you have a pre-conference. It's required for all announced observations under the recommendations of T-TESS. It gives you the opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge and skills for planning. We spend so much time as educators planning. So this is your opportunity to really shine. So I'm going to date myself a little bit. When I was in teacher prep school, we had to do this lesson cycle called Madeline Hunter lesson cycle, where it had a hook at the beginning. You had to list your lesson objective, your direct instruction, what questions you were going to ask during that direct instruction to assess their knowledge and their understanding. And then you would have maybe a group activity, independent practice, and then an assessment. That was that lesson cycle. And the lesson cycle is still like that. But when you are given the opportunity for a pre-conference, I tell teachers, you take the time to make that Madeline Hunter lesson plan. It is probably going to be multiple pages. List all of your higher order thinking questions in that lesson plan, because in the T-TESS Administrator Manual, it has a list of questions that your administrator can and probably will ask you. And here are 3 of those questions. What should the students know and be able to do by the end of the lesson? What will the teacher and students be doing to show progress toward mastery of the objectives? How will the teacher know the students have mastered the objectives? Okay, if you went in there not prepared, some of these questions could be difficult to answer on the spot. You know the answers, but you don't want to get in there and get a lot of nerves going and just, I mean, I know I'm like that. Like if someone hasn't prepared me for what I need to talk about, I kind of freeze up. And then after the fact, I'm like, I knew the answer to that question. Like, what in the world? Because I panic when someone asks me something that I wasn't prepared to answer at that moment. So take the time to do that robust lesson plan where you're going in and you're taking ownership of that pre-conference and you're doing 90% of the talking in that conference, and your administrator is only doing 10%, asking you questions and you're spitting the answers out. This is what my kids are going to do. This is my expectation. And then also during that pre-conference, it is important to notify them. I have this many students who are under the special education umbrella, this many under the 504, this many second language learners, and here's what I'm doing to modify the curriculum to meet their needs. If you have some students in there with challenging behaviors, that is the time to talk about. If you see Martha over here doing something else, that's because we have an if-then. If she does this, then she can do that, and that at that particular time may be the time that she is getting to do one of her choices. So just explaining everything that may be observed in your classroom. Post-conference. So your administrator, you had your pre-conference, they came in, they did your formal observation. We're gonna say your administrator watched the entire lesson from the beginning to the end. Within 10 days, they've got to call you in for a post-conference. This is the process. This is what it should look like. You go in, they're going to introduce, tell you about the conference process, and then they're going to ask you a general impression question about the observation. And more than likely, it's going to be something like, how did you think the lesson went? Okay, and like I tell teachers, even if it was a dumpster fire, you find something positive to say about that lesson. Little Johnny sat in his seat for the first time for 45 minutes this whole entire school year. You find something positive to highlight when they ask you that general impression question. Then they're going to go into the different dimensions and give you what level that you landed on. They are going to give you one dimension to reinforce. They're going to say, hey, you did really well on this dimension, and here's what I observed. And this is why I think you are a rock star in this area. Then they're going to give you an area that needs refinement. Maybe an area you're good in, but they feel like, you could take it to the next level. They will give you that evidence and make some suggestions. Now, if you are in agreement with that refinement area, that you really are struggling with that is a time to say, hey, maybe I need to go back and visit my goal setting and professional development plan and change those goals. Now, goal setting and professional development plan is a whole entire, it's another training that we have, and you can actually rewatch the one that we did right before school started to find out more about that process. But it is self-reflective. It's not a PLC goal, a grade level goal, a department goal, a campus goal. It is self-reflection on yourself as a classroom teacher, because what I need to work on and what Hannah needs to work on are probably two completely different things. So go back, and you can go back and watch that training if you would like on our webpage, and we will probably offer it again soon. But just know that everyone is going to walk out of this post-conference with one dimension that they need to work on a little bit more. Then they're going to review all of the ratings and all of the evidence that they gathered during that formal observation that determined what level you were going to be on. So after everything that we've discussed, using the chat box, tell me, what do you think it means to be proficient? What does it mean to be proficient? Okay, Jose says it is a good teacher, but not a rock star teacher, a solid teaching. Okay. Sarah says, rock solid teacher. Pamela says, you are doing what needs to be done. Rock solid teacher. To get the job done. Yes, Ken, and that is our ultimate goal, just to get our job done, while maintaining our mental health at the same time these days. Proficient is performing what is expected. Getting the job done, but not always perfect. Okay, you all have some really great answers. So here is your reality check about the T-TESS evaluation. Everyone needs to understand that obtaining a rating of distinguished will be very difficult, very, very difficult. It's really there to just not be able to achieve. I'm not sure why they put that over there. And I think we are at the schoolhouse enough to not actually live there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And like I tell teachers, if you're distinguished or you're proficient, is your paycheck going to change? No, it's still going to be the same amount every month until they go up on the insurance, and then it's going to be less. So don't kill yourself trying to get over there to the far left. Remember that learning is an ongoing process. Everyone has room for improvement. We all have room for improvement in every aspect of our life, whether it's personal or professional. We all can improve in something. When you are a proficient teacher, it is a sign of a successful school. You are a rock solid educator. That's exactly what they told us in the administrator training. That is a rock solid educator. That means the teacher is successful, the students are successful, the campus is successful, everyone is successful. So I know those of us who did PTESS for 20 years and then switched over to T-TESS, it was kind of like, oh, I've always been exceeds proficient, and now I'm just proficient. When you compare the two, PTESS and T-TESS, exceeds proficient is proficient under the T-TESS rubric. So we have a bell curve here based on that conversation I just had with you. In the chat box, what does this bell curve show us about T-TESS scores? So the number of teachers is 300 teachers, and this is how they scored, you know, distinguished being a 1, and then all the way to the right. You all are exactly right. The majority of teachers are going to be right dead in the center as proficient teachers. There are going to be very few to the far left, but at the same time, guess what? Very few to the far right. So if your administrator plotted how they scored teachers on the T-TESS, it should look like this. If their bell curve is looking like a skewed curve where most of their teachers are over 4 and 5, that's an administrator issue. That's not a teacher issue. They need to go back and revisit their administrator T-TESS manual to see, hey, you know, what am I doing wrong? Why are my scores looking like this when I plot them? So this is a timeline that kind of tells you the rules and the laws behind the teacher evaluation system. So during weeks 1 through 6, you will have a teacher orientation. That will be for the people who maybe came from a district that didn't do T-TESS as their evaluation system. But no later than the first 3 weeks of school and at least 2 weeks before the first observation, you have to have teacher orientation. You will also do your goal setting and professional development plan. It will be submitted to your appraiser for approval within 6 weeks from the day of completion. There will be a conference, possibly, if you are a first-year teacher on the appraisal system, a new teacher to the teaching profession, new to the district. You will actually have to have a conference. Otherwise, you just submit your goals to your administrator, and they may call you in for a conference. Week 6 through the end, under that also, where it shows weeks 1 through 6 and all the way to the end of the school year, you see it says informal observations and walkthroughs with ongoing feedback to support and develop teacher practices. Your administrator can do a walkthrough on day 1 of the school year. They can do a walkthrough the very last day of the school year. There is no rules that the commissioner has said is that you can't get walkthroughs or informal observations from day 1 to the last day of school. That little black box represents the first 2 weeks of school, or the first 2 weeks after you've had your T-TESS teacher orientation. You cannot have formal observations during the first 2 weeks of school or 2 weeks after you've had your formal T-TESS training. Formal observations can happen from week 3 all the way to the end of the school year. During week 6 through the end of the year, teacher orientation for late hires, your goal setting and professional development plan for late hires. Teachers are going to be doing ongoing review of their data, as well as administrators reviewing the teacher's data and the student data. You will be constantly visiting that goal setting and professional development plan to assess how you're progressing towards your goals. And are you, that professional development you decided to do, are you going to be able to do that? And how is that impacting your student performance? Goal setting and professional development plans are not set in stone. They can be altered at any time during the year. So if you set goals that you realize are not going to be, you're not going to be able to, they're not attainable, go back and redo them and give yourself a goal that you can do. And then also you're going to be doing ongoing collection of evidence to support domain 4. But I'm going to talk to you more about towards the end about collecting evidence for all 4 domains. And at least 15 days prior to the last day of instruction, you are going to have your end of year conference. At the end of your conference, your appraiser is going to review all of your summative scores for domains 1, 2, and 3, review data and evidence that was collected throughout the year for domain 4, and that includes evidence that you bring to the meeting, review the results of performance of your students, and review potential goals and PD plans for the next school year. So at your end of year conference, you should you should go ahead and do your goal setting and professional development plan for the following year, so that your summer professional development is going to be about the goals that you have set. If you wait till the school year starts to do that plan, it's going to be kind of hard to find PD that you can attend. Okay, so we're going to ask some questions about this. When can an appraiser do a walkthrough? Using your chat box, tell me, when can your appraiser do a walkthrough? Anytime. You're exactly right, from the first day all the way to the end. Next question, can I be appraised the first 2 weeks of school? So let me change that. Can you be formally appraised the first 2 weeks of school? Okay, I think it was, let's see, Olga for the win. No, you cannot have a formal observation the first 2 weeks of school. And if you're a late hire, and you have, say you had your T-TESS formal orientation today, the next 2 weeks are blacked out. Our next question, how long can a walkthrough be? How long can a walkthrough be? Is there a time limit for walkthroughs? Jose, you're correct. And Juan, no, there is no time limit on walkthroughs. They can be 5 minutes, they can be 5 hours. However, I will tell you, if your administrator is coming in and doing walkthroughs 2, 3, 4 times a week and staying for a long time, and your coworkers are not receiving those same number of walkthroughs, that is a red flag. Don't just let them continue to come in and do walkthroughs and give you negative feedback. You need to be proactive. Call your union rep to help you through the process of what you need to do. Yes, yes, Jose, if they provide you feedback in writing, that means it is going into your file. And they have to provide you that feedback within 10 days. So, I mean, I remember administrators coming into my classroom and doing a walkthrough, and maybe they got super busy and they never gave me feedback for that. So they can't really count that as a walkthrough because they didn't provide me the feedback within the 10 days required by law. And so that's something else to keep in mind, is that if they do a walkthrough, that's day 0, count out 10 business days, because that is the last day they can give you that feedback in writing. For walkthroughs, they do not require a formal conference. They usually will just alert you through email that you have something to review in your file. Last district I worked for used Eduphoria, and so we would get an email saying you have feedback in Eduphoria, and you click on it and you read it, and then you could, respond if you wanted to. The next question, are pre-conferences required? This is kind of a trick question. Are pre-conferences required? Okay, we got some yeses and nos for the formal. Okay, so under the T-TESS recommendations, it says you should have a pre-conference prior to a formal observation to discuss what you are going to be looking for as the administrator, and to give the teacher an opportunity to discuss her classroom, what's going on in her classroom and what he or she plans to teach. Pre-conferences are not required under the law. However, if your administrator is implementing T-TESS with fidelity and reliability, they will do a pre-conference before an announced formal observation. Are post-conferences required? Are post-conferences required? Yes, all post-conferences are required for all formal observations within 10 business days. Now, if they're just walkthroughs, like I said earlier, there's no post-conference required. Let's talk a little bit about your rights as a classroom teacher. You have the right to write a rebuttal to any information that will negatively impact your evaluation. However, most school districts have a policy in place that you must submit that rebuttal within 10 business days. It does not require your administrator to respond. It'll be something like, this is my response to the walkthrough conducted on 10/27/20, and then you just make your argument about why you don't agree with that negative information. Like I said, they don't have to respond. I have seen administrators in the past read those and say, you know what, maybe I need to go back and revisit this and do another walkthrough. But they don't have to respond to it. Doesn't mean that they're going to throw that information out of your file. If you want it thrown out of your file, that requires a grievance, which is a whole nother process. But just keep in mind, as I said earlier, if you're getting 3 or 4 walkthroughs a week and no one else is, as I called it when I was a teacher, you are on the hit list. Okay, and so you have to be proactive, because if your administrator recommends you for termination at the end of the school year, they are going to use any of the evidence they gathered through walkthroughs and formal observations to use as evidence to not renew your contract. You need to rebut or grieve any negative documentation, because if you filed for a non-renewal hearing and it went all the way to the Commissioner of Education and he looks at your file and you have not rebutted anything and you have not grieved anything, it's basically just accepting that information is factual and true. In other words, you're going to lose. You have to be proactive. We already discussed this, and I launched that question earlier. Does T-TESS mandate improvement plans? No, it doesn't. It does not mandate improvement plans. You have a goal setting and professional development plan, which is your improvement plan. Everyone has an improvement plan under the T-TESS evaluation. So we have teachers come to us and say, my administrator is putting me on an improvement plan. And my response is, okay, so essentially you have 2 plans now you have to keep up with while trying to teach these children during a pandemic. Don't set yourself up for failure. My response to the administrator would be, hey, T-TESS is a growth model evaluation system. I should go back and revisit the goals I set under that GSPD plan. Maybe I need to change them to address the issues that we feel are the most important for me to master now. Having 2 plans is setting yourself up for failure. Go back and change that goal setting and professional development plan. Amanda, yes, I hear that all the time, that appraisers tell teachers what their goals should be. They are actually supposed to be self-reflection. It doesn't say group reflection in the document. Go back and view that goal setting professional development plan training that is on the Texas AFT Bridges page, because it will explain it to you in depth. It is supposed to be self-reflection. What I need to work on and what you need to work on are probably 2 different things. So you get to the end of the school year and you have your end of year conference with your administrator. This is the way it is laid out. This graph was taken directly from the administrator manual. They're going to review your established goals that you created, summarize general impressions, analyze and evaluate the cause and effect of these relationships. This is your opportunity to say, because I attended that research-based ELL training last summer, I implemented these strategies with these students, and look how much they improved in their reading, writing, and speaking. You present all of the evidence you have that shows how you progressed on your goals. That new learning and connections. What are the takeaways? How is this going to change my teaching moving forward? Maybe I need to build on that a little bit more. Maybe I need to, over the summer, attend another PD opportunity that's going to help me make better connections with this group of students. I tell teachers, goal setting and professional development plans are for your long-term professional growth. It's not about those 20, 30, 40 kids sitting in your classroom right now. If your goals are geared towards those kids sitting in your classroom, is that going to have long-term impact on your teaching? No, it's not. These need to be long-term goals. If you're struggling with classroom management, you attend some classroom management courses that are going to impact your kids this year, next year, and 10 years from now. This is about long-term professional growth. Let's talk about lesson plan requirements. There are some things that they can require, and there are things they cannot require. And in that packet of papers in the Google Classroom, you will actually see a letter from our attorney, Martha Owen, who has written a brief about lesson plan requirements. So some of the things they can require is they can require a lesson plan template. We're seeing a lot of, online templates where the TEKs are already uploaded and you just click on the TEK. They can ask you to tell what TEK you're going to be teaching. and list the resources students will use. They can ask you to list the ways that you're going to modify or differentiate the activities for your various learners in your classroom. They can ask you about the assessments. Things that they cannot require you to list are your cognitive levels, or require you to do a self-evaluation of your lesson. Now, I tell teachers, when you have that formal observation, I think it's really important for you to do some self-reflection for your post-conference. So when you go into your post-conference, like, you can say, hey, this worked really well. I want to continue to use this strategy, but I noticed that maybe this didn't work so well, because this T-TESS is a growth model. It is great if it's implemented correctly. It's about you growing over your whole the rest of your career. So self-reflection and self-evaluation is really great to do after a formal observation for your post-conference. Now I'm going to talk to you about documenting your success. Begin collecting evidence now. This is vital for when you go to your end of year conference to show how much you're doing with your students, because I am telling you what, right now, no one realizes how much educators are doing to help their students be successful during these trying times. No one has any idea. So start documenting and gathering evidence. There are different ways you can gather evidence. These are just some ways. You can upload things into Google Drive, Dropbox. Live Binders is another online tool. The thing at the bottom right-hand corner is Eduphoria. Eduphoria, if your district is using that platform, actually has a place where you can upload documents, and some districts do require you to use that. And then I'm just kind of old school. I like the binder. I like to be able to see and touch things without, having to flip through it online. So, do whatever check with your administrator to see what they prefer. But, like, if you just use the old school binder, you can walk into that end of year conference with that, with all of your parent contact logs, student contact logs, sample lesson plans, all of those things. So in an evidence binder, here are the 5 tabs that I recommend that you have, or if you're going to be using Dropbox or Google Drive, create separate folders for these. Planning, instruction, classroom environment, professional practices and responsibility, and student demographics. It's important to include your student demographics in your portfolio, because that does impact how and why you teach. If you have a large special education population in your classroom, it's going to look completely different than the classroom that has all the gifted and talented students. So it's important for administrators to understand the demographics of your classroom, which guides the planning phase and instruction and your classroom environment, everything. This is a sample of a teacher who developed a portfolio. Carol out of Northside ISD was so sweet to allow me to use this in my presentations, but she is a high school Spanish teacher. And so this is some things that she included in her portfolio. She took pictures of things, and then she just listed what the objective was, what the task was, the academic target, and the environment. She's listed how she's differentiated the activities. She's taking pictures of, kids working together. I do recommend, as you can see, we blacked out these students' faces for privacy issues. But, like, if you are looking at moving to another district, portfolios are a great way to showcase what you do as a teacher. Here are some more artifacts that she put in her portfolio. And she's showing kids using technology, being able to use their creativity to get to whatever the objective is. Here's a final thought, and we were actually told this in the administrator training. When done well and right, T-TESS is not punitive. It is not an HR function, but it is actually professional development. It's about taking teachers where they are, putting supports and interventions in place to get them to the next level. And when I attended this academy, I was shocked. Like, we watched this teacher, and it was one of those dumpster fire lessons, as I call them. It was really bad. Like, I had trouble watching. And the two instructors, who were like former curriculum superintendent people, they were like, what would you do if you're an administrator? Well, the consensus was like, yeah, nicely tell her that maybe teaching is not for her, because it was that bad. The concept she was teaching, she wasn't even teaching it correctly. And she said, I just want you to know that like 3 years later, this teacher was the teacher of the year. And we were just completely shocked. She said, you take teachers where they are, you give them the supports and training they need to get to the next level. And as the instructor said, teachers are not beating down the door wanting jobs in school districts anymore. 20 years ago, that was the case. You could fire a teacher because you had 10 more candidates wanting that job. That's not the case today. I sit on the teacher diversity committee for AFT National. There's been a 35% decline in the number of people entering teacher prep programs since 2009. Education is in a crisis. The pandemic has made it worse. Teachers are belling left and right. There's like something like 150,000 teachers in Texas who are eligible for retirement right now. But there's not 150,000 teachers in teacher prep programs ready to enter the teaching force. So the final thought about T-TESS is you take teachers where they are, you grow them to be phenomenal teachers. Great teachers are not born, we are made. If you are not a member of Texas AFT, please consider joining us. You can go to texasaft.org, find your local affiliate. If you are an at-large member, say you live out in a rural area, we have an associate member program that you can join, and that will give you access to lots of things. We have member benefits where you get discounts. This is free professional development. This is your union dues at work, helping us bring this to everyone. Our next session will happen on Wednesday, November the 11th from 6:30 to 7:30. We are partnering with the Texas National Board Coalition for Teaching. If you are interested in becoming a nationally board certified teacher, this is a pre-candidacy information session that will happen on the 11th. So register for it. There is a QR code, and Hannah will also drop the link in the chat box for you to register. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to give you some information. You decide if you want to be in our pre-candidacy cohort. If you do, we will run that cohort probably about 6 weeks. And then you have to register to actually enter the national board process in February. You have 3 years to complete all 4 modules. We will offer you support and guidance throughout the process. But the pre-candidacy kind of gives you a taste of the expectation before you actually pay your money to become a candidate. Under House Bill 3 that was passed in 2019, House Bill 3 allotted some money so that if you became nationally board certified, you could potentially make a lot more money than what you're making right now. So I encourage you to attend this to find out more information. Also, to find out for future PD opportunities, we have a Facebook page, Texas AFT Bridges Institute for Professional Development. We also have Twitter, and we have a web page where you can view any of our previous sessions. The only thing is, if you view a session, I have no way of knowing how long you participated, so I can't issue you a CPE certificate. But if you attend our live trainings, you get a CPE certificate. And so now I will open it up for question and answer. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask me a question.
Jamie, this is JJ with La Jolla.
Hi,
Can you hear
JJ.
me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Today I got a question from a teacher in one of the elementaries that they're being required to submit like a pre-conference questionnaire for walkthroughs. Is that something new, or is it just something that that principal might be doing on her campus?
It sounds like something that the principal is doing on their campus. That's not a requirement or a recommendation with T-TESS.
Well, I actually told her it was a good thing, because if you're getting a pre-question, that means that they're telling you when they're going to be doing it. I said, at least she's telling you she's going to be doing it tomorrow, and she wants those 4 questions before she does it. So
Yes, absolutely. That that kind of gives you a heads up.
yeah,
I would kind of see that as an advantage.
right, exactly. That's what I told her, exactly that. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm going to launch the evaluation, and you can continue to unmute yourself to ask questions.
Jamie, we actually got a question if we could show the QR again for the national certification.
Yes. Let me back. Well, hang on. Can you drop the link, Hannah?
Yes, I did, but I can do it again. I think
Okay.
wanted
If you'll drop the link, and whoever that was, if you will just send me an email, jwalmack@texasaft.org, I will send you the flyer that has the QR code. You can also find the QR code on our Bridges Facebook page, and a direct link you can click on to register. Any other questions from anyone?
Well, I was just going to mention about the virtual observations that they want to do now with all this remote learning going on.
Yes, so in that Google Classroom, TEA actually developed a virtual rubric for domains 1, 2, and 3. It is in the Google Classroom, where it tells an administrator how to evaluate an educator virtually. So take a look at that. But as far as Texas AFT goes, we are working on some things to address teacher evaluations during this time, because some teachers are having to do face-to-face and virtual. Some are 100% virtual. Some of them are just doing face-to-face. There's kids in and out because of quarantining. It's a hot mess. So just know that we are working on some things. The State Federation is to address this issue. So more to come on that.
Okay, good.
So 55% of you, 58% of you have taken the evaluation. Thank you. I actually do look at this. I actually go back and refine my training as needed. So if you're like tired of hearing my voice, you can tell me like you talk too much. It's really hard in this virtual world to do these trainings versus live trainings. But I try to make them as interactive and engaging as possible. Any other questions from anyone?
Could I get a copy of the entire training? Can we get a copy of that?
Yes, if you, I'll have Hannah, can you drop the link again? If you go to the Google Classroom, everything we discussed is there. The PowerPoint's there, all of the handouts, including the administrator rubric, Chapter 149 of the Commissioner Rules. There is also a rubric in there for those of you who teach special needs kids or have special needs kids in your classroom. That rubric is in there too, on how, what you can do for domains 1, 2, and 3 to show that you're actually achieving that, that for that dimension. Okay. There's a lot of things. The file is too large to email. It will not let me email it because it's that big.
Okay, then.
and a few people have said that the Google Classroom still didn't work with their personal email, what do you recommend that they do next?
Shoot me an email and we will see, because I thought maybe it was Jose who said that once he used his personal, it worked. It should work. As long
I
as you're,
opened it with my personal email, so.
yeah, if you're trying to use your district email, it is not going to work because only district people can access you can only access things within your district and not things outside of your district. But if you still have trouble, shoot me an email. I sent everyone an email today reminding them about the training. Just respond to that and it'll come directly to me. And we'll see if we can troubleshoot.
Essa é uma outra coisa.
Anything else that anyone has a question about? And if you think of anything, just shoot me an email. I'm here to help you all however you need. That is my job, my role, and my responsibility is to support teachers across the state with anything that you need. And just be looking ahead. We're going to do the national board thing, but we are also going to be doing some self-care sessions, maybe have some comedy sessions. Our professional issues committee met last night and is comprised of teachers across the state. They came up with some really great ideas about what teachers are needing across the state to help them during this time. So we hope to have weekly sessions on various topics and issues that are impacting you directly. But if no one has any further questions, I am going to end the Zoom, and thank you so much, and be looking for an email coming from Hannah or I with your CPE certificate. And you all have a good evening.
Go vote, go vote.
Yeah, and go vote. If you haven't voted, go vote. This week is early voting.